March 17th, 2020. It was supposed to be my day of independence. In an ideal world, I was supposed to come out of my exam hall, not caring about the consequences of the exam I just gave. Meet my friends, celebrate our freedom when we finished our last school exam. But in reality, I wore my mask, stepped out of the exam hall, sanitized my hands, didn't hug my friends, sat in my car, and just came home. It was at this fleeting moment that I realized how futile that board exam was at that time. How futile it was to spend sleepless days and nights worrying about it. How futile it was to let go of things that I loved doing because I had to concentrate on excelling in that exam. Eventually, on 17th March 2020, I came out in a world that no longer thought of that exam being the most significant event. We were suddenly pushed into our own solitary confinements. And the only realization that I could come up to was that during the time I was running a rat race, I had completely forgotten my voice, just for a futile moment of freedom. Many people talk about how 2020 changed their lives. And it changed mine too. In today's world, there is nothing more tangible than my words that I can offer to you. But I can tell you how I found the courage to get my words back. For the longest time, I felt that voices of young people don't matter. That's what we're told, right? You're too young, you don't have the expertise, you haven't seen what we have seen, we are more experienced. All of which is true, but not necessarily right. Yes, we are young, that's our age. Yes, we are inexperienced, again, our age. We haven't seen what you have seen because we all have our own experiences. And you are more experienced because we are still experiencing life just like you are. Then why is it that we must shy away from raising our voice? Lose it in a process of becoming expert robots? Why must we be afraid of our own voice? With the onset of the pandemic, while millions of experienced experts felt voiceless, I learned to recognize and use my own voice. I learned to advocate for change. Even during the most tough times, I learned to channelize my passion into my work and exercise the sheer unapologetic virtue of dedication that I had. Along with 150 other young people, I worked on a 4-month-long digital campaign to spread awareness and extend our help around issues of gender equality, mental health, fake news, hate speech, all issues that increased during the pandemic. I understood the amount of privilege I held when I had a safe environment to work in while our country was facing one of the biggest humanitarian crises, the migrant crisis. And so to put our platform, our voice, and our privilege to good use, we set out to fundraise with Oxfam India and managed to raise 500,000 rupees for vulnerable communities. And it was this experience that made me realize the true extent of my knowledge and privilege and how I can employ my learning to propagate inclusivity and compassion in society even during the most challenging times. There was a lot of helplessness during the pandemic. And while the pandemic was way beyond my control, I believed our response as a society wasn't. I felt the need to replace the hatred, the misinformation, adversity, and ignorance that fueled during this time. And I knew I couldn't help a million people, but I could at least help one. And I didn't want to shy away from that responsibility. And that is when I learned to raise my voice. I learned to advocate for change even during the most tough times. And I no longer felt that I'm a helpless young citizen that cannot create positive change. I now believe that I have the ability to foster change, not by arrogance, argument, or disagreement, but rather by empathy, by kindness, and by discourse. This realization led to the development of many important questions in my mind. about the fate of the world, where it's headed, what the possible repercussions of the pandemic may be, and how can we solve these problems. It led me to start my own social enterprise, Global Volunteers Action Network, to enable people by creating volunteering opportunities and giving them a platform to work on causes that they are passionate about, to help them find their cause, their calling, and their own voice. I was recently also given the opportunity to represent my organization at COP26 for a forum organized by UN Women UK. And I heard from the most inspiring people in the world, top leaders, corporate giants, youth environmentalists, and activists. But the only voice I found missing was that of the common person, someone like you and me. Because for me, climate action did not begin at goals of net zero, lowered carbon emissions, or clean energy fuels. It started with no wastage in my kitchen. It started with segregating waste in my locality and recycling and upcycling the things that I owned. It started with voices of the youth, voices for collective action, and voices of hundreds of people who give their words to the fate of this earth every single day and were not present in that room. I once heard a story about a Gurkha rifleman who was trapped in southern Burma, who walked alone 600 miles to escape the Japanese prison that he was put in. His journey was 5 months long, though he never needed to ask for a way because he never lost his way. When he reached India, he showed his map to intelligence officers that were very curious to know about his escape. He had marked all the routes, landmarks, rivers he had crossed to reach India, and that map led him to his freedom. But the officers were a bit perplexed because he was using a street map of London. As a young girl growing up in India, I carry a diverse cultural background and values of companionship, empathy, and brotherhood. But I've also experienced discrimination on the basis of gender, seen sections of society being denied basic necessities like health and education, and observed how economic status defines a person's identity. I've wanted to question, revolt, change the way the world looks at these problems. I wanted to create a world where knowledge leads to empowerment, inclusivity is celebrated, and collaborative action can be taken to break societal stigmas. And just like that Gurkha rifleman, I learned to navigate my way without pre-written maps, create change with passion, and find a voice that echoed. Thank you so much for having me here today.